tonight. We want you to be able to ask some questions. Like I say, we might not have all the answers to those, and I think there's still more things that we could share, more things from our lives, and maybe some things that weren't necessarily the most positive in the way that we went about it. Everybody's been so positive about it. You know, they're excited about their marriage, and we want you to be excited about getting married and having those aha moments. This is who God has for me. We want you to be able to be successful in a marriage. And that's a good question. What does success in a marriage look like? And those are a bunch of questions we can ask, but I want you to be able to ask a few questions. So Uncle Brian has a couple mics, and so if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and he'll pass it out. Oh, Uncle Brian, you have a question?
I have a question. So, since I have the mic, I go first. I think this question pertains more to the three on the left and the couple on the right, just because of your situation. But the impetus or the idea for courting, dating the way you did came from where? I'm assuming mostly probably from parents, but that's an assumption on my part. If it did come from the parents or whoever, how was that instilled in you that you personally accepted that and then followed that, you know, use that as a path? Because I know as a parent myself, sometimes you can't beat an idea into a kid's head, they have to accept it.
Yeah, Brian, I'll take that question because I tried it two different ways, and so I'll tell you how I experienced it. Because I grew up in a household of faith, right? And so I grew up in sort of the wake of the I Kiss Dating Goodbye movement. You know, I watched many families before me go through the courting process. Claudio, right? I watched his relationship. I watched Daniel and Caitlin, Anna's brother and sister, so you know I saw all of those, and then I tried to do a courting. I tried to court Anna, and we had that failed relationship that I talked about. And you know I was really young, and so I'm not going to put on the model any faults of mine. But I did notice that there were some problems with the standard courtship that we often hear about. And through the years, I've watched some of those problems to see, you know, how they get played out in a relationship, how a couple works around those, different stuff like that. And the idea of courtship, as several people have defined, is that you've got a healthy family on two sides, and you know, this couple is coming together and they're interacting with both sides of the family, and you know, the boyfriend, so to speak, is interacting with the dad and asking his permission, and they've got a good relationship, and you know, he's talking to the dad's involved, maybe there's some rule setting back and forth like that. And that works, in my mind, really well for anybody, you know, like 15 to 20 kind of age range, right? Because you're young, you need that guidance, you really need the wisdom of a patriarch. Hopefully your dad's involved, hopefully the, you know, girl you're, you know, in a relationship with, her dad's involved. But as you start to get older than that, there's a lot of, you know, as Genesis would say, leaving and cleaving, right? And you're leaving your own family. Hopefully you're still on good terms with your dad. You know, all of those assumptions can start to break down when you get into the real world. Maybe you don't have a healthy set of parents on both sides. Maybe she doesn't have parents, right? All of those things are possible. And so, like, does the courtship model go out the road? Go out the window? Like, if that's the only way we can do things, if all of the principles are set up around that, then, like, is it even okay to do anything else? So we need to be careful that when we promote something like courtship, that we don't promote it as the only way of doing things, right? And so when I approached the relationship a second time, I had some of those ideas in my head. And so I approached it in sort of a hybrid relationship. And that was, John was very involved, but he didn't set the rules. He gave me advice and I took it or I didn't. And I really tried hard not to pass up any good advice, but it was ultimately my relationship. And if you're, you know, thinking about asking the father of the young lady that you're intending to court whether you can have a relationship with her or whether you can get married to her, what if he says no? What are you going to do? right? Like the relationship needs to be able to survive through tougher things than the dad saying no, right? Like hopefully that's really good wisdom, and you could look at that and go, yeah, maybe he's right. But I mean, what if he's a jerk and he's not in the picture? Or what if he's a jerk and he is in the picture, right? Like, what do you do at that point? Hopefully the relationship is stronger than some, whacked out relatives inside the family. So a courtship model is great if you have two great working families that are coming together. And I think that's honestly probably a really ideal way of it happening. But it doesn't always work that way. And so you need to be flexible, and you need to have a tailored approach. You need to look at the benefits that the model you're going to implement is going to have, and you need to think about it in a way that's really practical to your life situation. Asking her dad if you can marry her may not even be an option. So keep an open mind. Try to honor God at every step. Honor as much of the family as you possibly can, because you're going to be hitched to them for the rest of your life, right? You're going to be spending Christmases with them. You want the best possible relationship you can with everybody on both sides. So if you have a chance to spend time with that other half of the family, do at every possible chance, because it's just so invaluable, so invaluable. I live with John and Barbara now, and it's the greatest thing. If I didn't have a good relationship with them when I married Anna, like there's no way we could reap the benefits that we have now if I had messed up that relationship earlier. So.
I think bouncing off what you're saying about relationship stuff, I didn't know if I wanted to get married when I was like 12, 13, 14. You think about those things when you're kids. It doesn't have to be like this is a decision, something you think about. Oh, I didn't start thinking about marriage until I was 18 or 20 or 27. My brain was actually going there when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. I didn't want to get married because my parents had been divorced. And I knew that my chances, looking just at statistics with what I knew as a kid, it's like my chances for success were pretty slim. And so why would I want to go into a relationship where my chances of success were slim? And then especially Melinda's parents were divorced. And so, oh man, we had like the double negative on us. And so like, how could we ever survive, But it's not about what statistics are or what the world is out there, but it's about, God building something that's really incredible. And so when you talk about, how do you instill that into your children, is talking about the incredibleness of how God develops relationships, how God's design is the best, and promoting God's design out there. And so that's part of what we're doing here, is trying to promote God's design. And the design isn't that you follow a particular set of rules, but that you have some good accountability in your relationships. You have ways that you can meet somebody that doesn't have to revolve around, say, like the dating game, because you can look good on 2 or 3 dates. You can go on a date and look really good. You dress up, you open the door, you keep your mouth clean, you pay for the meal, and man, this guy's, he's incredible. I can't believe it. And if you get married based on a couple of 2-hour sessions, you're going to be in a real big surprise going down the road. And so the idea of this is that you get to know, well, what is her family like? What is his family like? What things do they value? What do you value? And how do you interact? Does she get mad when you play Monopoly? Or, just, I do? How would I know that? No, it's like, but what things are there, in your relationships as they develop? You're going to know if this is the right person that God's leading you to by spending those kind of times, especially with their family. You're going to see, the things that are on their walls, what's in the bedrooms, the different things, the way their house is structured and move, and you'll be able to fit in and know how those things are. And so showing, though, that this model of being able to be not just like, oh, well, I was traveling and I met somebody and we just had a great time when we were in Paris, and so we decided we'd get married. It's like, well, that's not really, just take a second look. What are you jumping into? You don't really know what you're jumping into when you do those kind of things. But on the other hand, we have talks of relationships really weren't all that long in order to get to know who this person was. So it's not like it has to drag on for years and years. Like Melinda and I, it took 6 years to figure out what we were doing. No. So anyway, other questions?
This is mostly to Rachel and Joshua. I heard you guys both mention individually that there's questions you should ask. There's things you need to know about somebody before you marry them. I heard you both say it individually. But what are some things that you guys think are really important to know? And of course, like, this is really minimal stuff, but like, what are some things that are the most important to know before you go into a marriage?
I'm going to start because you're a guy. And I have some very specific thoughts here. I think that the first thing you need to do, the first step, isn't what questions should I ask her. It is, who am I before God? If you don't know, if you don't have that figured out, you're on the wrong track trying to go get married. You just are. Because everything in a relationship and in marriage and in parenting and everything else that happens after you both say you do is going to come from who you know you are before God and who God has told you who you are and the mission and the life purpose he has told you you are. Because that is going to be what your woman follows. She's going to follow that, okay? And she's going to want to take confidence in it. If you are wishy-washy on that, you're still trying to figure it out, you don't have any business trying to gain a bride. Because you want to give her probably three things: stability, trust, and someone that she can follow. Because that's going to help her help you. That's going to help her realize what God has designed her to do, which is to lead with you a legacy, build up an army, do whatever God has put on your heart to do. So that's the first thing you need to do. Really figure that out. Do some praying, do some fasting, do some really thinking that through. Who am I before God? What has he called me to do? Once you know that, and you talk to your folks, or you talk to your counselors, and you research scripture, and you like this, okay, this is who God has designed me to be, you know, and you feel comfortable, and you feel assured in that. Then I think it really comes down to, what direction am I heading? What direction is she heading? So it's the first question I'd ask young ladies: what direction are you heading in life? What's God put on your heart? Where does God have you? Where does God have you now? Where does God have you in the future? How do you know that God has you in that direction? You can camp on one question and talk an hour or two around it as you explore other questions you can talk about that explore that topic. Because you want to know that if this young lady is really heading somewhere else, and God has clearly told you to go here, that's not a good match. Maybe it's not a good match now. Maybe it's a good match later when God may redirect her. But if God does redirect her, how has God redirected you? Is it because I entered the picture? Or is it because God really is redirecting you? And I think that that would be one of the most important things that, as a young man, I would encourage you to, what direction is God having her go? Explore that in all its nuances. And the second thing is, how does she think? How does she make decisions? How does she really, whether those are easy decisions, mediocre decisions she doesn't care about, hard decisions. I remember talking to my boys about this a few years ago, about what kind of questions do you ask a young lady? And the idea of, how does she think? How does she process life? How does she get from point A to point B? Might take you some time to get through, as far as just exploring it in a natural setting. Because asking a young lady questions can be tricky. Because you don't want to lead her to maybe an answer that she thinks you're looking for.
I wasn't supposed to feel like I was being interviewed, is that what you're saying?
Of course not. But you also want her to feel comfortable. And having a natural conversation about something allows her to feel like you're just talking. And in just talking, you know where you're heading in that conversation. You know what you are actually interested in getting from her to learn about her. So what direction is God having her go? And then how does she think? How does she make decisions?
This is going to sound terribly mercenary, I suppose, but you're almost making a business transaction, and it's terrible to put it that way. But like we heard earlier from Josiah saying, so much of your life is going to be spent hanging out together. to even make sure that this is someone that you enjoy being around, whose advice you trust, where the law of kindness is on her tongue, where she's making wise transactions throughout her everyday life. This is someone who I remember encountering one of my friends saying, I'm going to be really, really picky who my daughters marry, but my sons, I'm not going to worry too much. And I'm thinking, a materialistic and vain wife can destroy your son's wealth forever. God is desirous that we grow, and He will use whatever means to make sure that we grow. I married into a family that had a lot of communication problems, and it has been hard, very, very, very hard. And it's not all roses at all, and it has grown me up like you can't imagine. And did it mean that I shouldn't have married Joshua? Absolutely not, because God chose Joshua for me, therefore He chose my in-laws for me as well. And they are continual sources of growth for me. I knew that going into my marriage with Joshua, that it was going to be hard. Communication was going to be a constant battle, and it was going to be a constant pain as well. But it's caused us to grow. And so, all the basic ones like children and finances and, direction, like what he's talking about. You already know all those things. But making sure that the filters, the rose-colored filters, come off right at the beginning. You don't go into them with the rose-colored filters on, so you can see who you're really talking to be sure.